Good morning, MPC kids. Good morning, MPC family. We're going to do some pre-recorded children's sermons for a while so you guys can watch them from the comfort of your home whenever you have some time and whenever it's good for your schedule. So today we are going to look at another person from the Old Testament, maybe a story you're not as familiar with. Last week we looked at the life of Cain, and this week we're going to look at the life of Sarah. And before we get into talking about her life, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever made a promise to somebody, or have you ever had someone promise something to you? Usually when we make a promise to someone, it's about something very important to us. And there are symbols of different promises that we have examples of. So for example, a fun way is that if your parents have ever purchased something with a credit card, when you sign, when you scan it and then you sign on the line, your parents are promising that they're going to pay for what they purchased at a later time. Another example is when you put something in the mail. There's the address and a stamp on it, and you're promising and the mail person is promising that they're going to take it to the person that you have addressed the letter to. And another promise is that when people give each other wedding rings at a wedding, they are promising to take care of each other no matter what. For richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. It's a pretty big promise that they get up there and they share with everyone who is there, and they have these rings on as a reminder that they promised each other and they promised God that they were going to take care of each other forever. Well, promises are also very important to God. And in today's Bible story, we're going to look at the life of Sarah. And Sarah was the wife of Abraham, who you might remember, and you probably have heard of him before. God had told Abraham to move to a new land, and he promised Abraham that he was going to take care of him and that Abraham was going to become the father of many nations. Many nations, more than the stars in the sky, more than the amount of sand on the beach. That's a lot of nations, a lot of people. Which, if Abraham was going to be the father of nations, that meant that Sarah was going to be the mother of all of these nations too. Well, Abraham listened to God and he moved to the new land, but he wasn't quite sure about that promise about becoming the father of many nations, because at that time Abraham didn't really have any children and he was really old. Both he and Sarah were in their 90s, and so way beyond having kids at that point, so they weren't quite sure how that was going to happen. And God reassured Abraham, though, that he would indeed bless Sarah and give her a son, even though she was very old. Now, Sarah hadn't heard this news yet, and so one day God sent 3 messengers to Abraham's house. And custom it was that whenever visitors came, you would feed them and take care of them and help make them feel comfortable. So when they showed up, Abraham said, "Sarah, go in the kitchen, fix something please for us, and bring it back so we can make our guests feel at home." And so Sarah went ahead and did this, but she was very curious about who these men were. And so she gave them what they needed, and then she waited outside of the tent where they were talking to Abraham. And Sarah listened to them talk. And she overheard the men talking to Abraham about how that this time next year, Sarah would have a baby. Specifically, she would have a son. Well, when Sarah heard this, she laughed to herself. She goes, I'm 90 years old. How in the world am I going to give birth to a son at this age? And the messengers, who were actually sent by God, like I said, and God himself was kind of with them there, overheard Sarah laughing and asked Abraham, "Well, why did Sarah laugh?" And the messenger said, "Is there anything too hard for the Lord?" Now, when Sarah was confronted about her laughing, she denied it, probably because she was a little bit afraid and maybe embarrassed that she had laughed. And God did say, "You did laugh." He confirms it. But you know what's awesome about God is that he didn't make Sarah feel bad for laughing. He uses the moment of Sarah's lack of faith that he could do anything to reassure Sarah and all of us that nothing is beyond God's ability. And 1 year later, guess what? Even though Sarah was so old, she did have a baby. And they named him Isaac, which means laughter, as a reminder that God can do anything, even when we don't think it's possible. He wants us to trust him. And so this story serves to remind us today that God's promises always comes true. He always keeps his word. Even when we question him and we don't see a way for it to happen, God will make it happen if he has promised it. So we offer praise to God today for being faithful, even when we struggle to believe his promises.